At 6. So we're finishing at 10 to 6. So this is going to be a focus.
So let's go.
Focus stuff. It's just starting up. It's starting up. It will start in about 5, 4, 3, 2. It will start. It will start. Here we go. Yes. Okay, hello and welcome back to Daf Yomi, and today we have a special one brought to you from Kinlos. We are going to continue the discussion of how we learn out the prohibitions of both eating and more specifically the prohibition of getting benefit from something in today's Daf, and then that will segue into a new discussion about how one transgresses the prohibition of eating, of eating or of getting benefit. But let's just begin. Now, remember, we had a dispute between Rabbi Avohu on the one hand and Chizkiah on the other, whether when the Torah says it shall not be eaten, that includes both eating and benefit. According to Rabbi Avohu, it meant both. And according to Chizkiah, no. When the Torah said don't eat, it meant don't eat, but it doesn't tell me anything about not getting benefit. Benefit is still permitted. However, they both agreed that when it came to the word it shall not be eaten, which is in the sort of the broader sense, in the passive sense, it shall not be eaten rather than the active don't eat. So then it shall not be eaten means everything that surrounds eating as well. Okay, so including getting benefit. And that was the dispute that we saw between Rabbi Avohu and Chizkiah. Now that we have that dispute between Rabbi Avohu and Chizkiah, so the Gemara is going to attempt to sort of reset all the goalposts. And imagine that we don't know Chizkiah and we don't know Rabbi Avohu almost. All we have is different options to how to learn the verses. And that's what the Gemara is going to do today. So, Yosef Ahumi Rabbanan Kamei de Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmeni. There's a certain one of the rabbis who is sitting before Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmeni. Even though today's daf is daf 24, we're starting a little bit further up onto 23b in order to get the full picture. So he's sitting in front of Shmuel ben Achmeni, Yosef, and he's sitting v'ka'amar mishmei de Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi. And he says in the name of Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi, he says, Minayin l'kod yisurin shebatorah dichi heichi da asurin ba'achila hachinami asurin ba'hanah. How do we know that in all the cases of there's something which is prohibited in the Torah, that just as it's prohibited for consumption, it's for eating, it's also prohibited to get benefit from it? How do we know such a thing? Now, you've got two answers already. You know that we've got Rabbi Avohu, and you know that we've got Chizkiah. But here we're almost like we're starting again, as if we never knew the ways that these two different people have navigated the verses. So Umaynihu, what are these cases that are prohibited both for eating and for getting benefit from? There's only two cases that we've actually come out so far that have both prohibitions. Everything else, either according to Rabbi Avohu, it was both were prohibited initially, and then another verse came to make it permitted to get benefit from. So we saw, for example, by nevela, that it said don't eat the nevela, and then it said but you can get permission to eat the nevela from the Torah. Or we were talking about not nevela, but we were talking about fine. So that was so we saw there was an exclusion. Or Rabbi Avohu already said. Or Chizkiah already said that anytime it says don't eat, that only implied eating, but benefit was permitted. So the only two occasions where we have both eating is prohibited and benefit is prohibited is talking about chametz on Pesach and the ox that was stoned. Both of those things may not only be, it's not only that they may not be eaten, but also there's no ability to get benefit from them. So how do we know? So Teipuk lei, we should learn it out. Milo ye'achel. We should learn it out from the fact that it says it shall not be eaten. The Gemara says lo ye'achel isur achila mashmalei isur hana lo mashmalei. So here the Gemara is disagreeing with everything we said before, even though it said it shall not be eaten in the sense, in the manner of presentation, which until now we understood, even according to Chizkiah, implied everything that goes into eating, including benefit, is included. The Gemara here says no. lo ye'achal, it shall not be eaten, just means it shall not be eaten, quite literally. We don't know anything about the prohibition of getting benefit. So the Gemara says, well, typically minavela. Maybe we should learn out from nevela, learn out from the nevela, just as from the nevela offering, it says, sorry, not the nevela offering, just as the nevela, when an animal has dropped dead and the Torah said, don't eat it, and then gave express permission to get benefit, to either give it to a righteous Gentile or to sell it to a non-righteous Gentile. So just as over there, by nevela, we had a understanding that anytime the Torah prohibited eating, then it also prohibited getting benefit from until the Torah specifically excluded something. So too over here, the Torah says it shall not be eaten. That implies an issa, a prohibition to eat, and also a prohibition to get benefit. So the Gemara says, why not get it from nevela? He says, Savalaka Rabbi Yehuda, da'amad dvarim kichsavan. Well, this person holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who will not allow us to learn the prohibition of getting benefit from a nevela, because maybe the reason that by the nevela we were taught explicitly that we can only give it to a righteous Gentile or sell it to a non-righteous Gentile is because even though it's permitted to get benefit, we are restricting what sort of benefit one is allowed to get from a nevela, and therefore there's nothing to learn from the nevela. The Gemara says, well, Rabbi Yehuda, if you're going to hold like Rabbi Yehuda, typically mehecha denafkile Rabbi Yehuda. So take that idea, take the idea that sometimes the Torah will reveal to us that the prohibition to eat includes all things, and then it's specifically an exclusion that removes it from that place, and that will be a precedent then to all other times the Torah prohibits eating. It doesn't just prohibit eating, it also prohibits benefit. So learn it from where Rabbi Yehuda learns it from. He learns it from the what we saw on Shabbat, on the Daf on Shabbat, that the treifa, the animal that is found to have a treifa in it, say after shechita, so that animal, the carcass, may be thrown to the dogs. So learn from there that we can throw it to the dogs at least we can get benefit from it. So you see once again that anything where any time it prohibits eating, it also prohibits benefit, unless the Torah tells me there's a specific exclusion. Throw it to the dogs, a specific exclusion. Bailey's going to be very hungry, very happy even. So the Gemara says, no, kasavar chulin shenishchatu ba'azar de'iraisa. So no, because this person holds that we need the word oso, we need the word to throw it to the dogs. That's not coming to teach that we may get benefit. That's coming to teach that there's a problem of chulin, that is of ordinary food that is slaughtered in the temple precinct. That verse isn't available to us. So hold on a second. So the Torah said don't eat. How do I know it also implies benefit? I go to nevela. The nevela said you can give it to the righteous Gentile, etc., etc. No, we hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is going to learn it. Rabbi Yehuda is going to learn it from throw it to the dogs. No, throw it to the dogs. That verse is also needed. So where are you going to learn it from? So minayin, where will we get the idea that not only is it prohibited to eat, it's also prohibited to get benefit? So the Gemara brings a new option. It says any chatas offering, any sin offering that will be brought of its blood. And the verse continues, any chatas which is brought from its blood to the tent of meeting to atone in holiness, lo se'achel, it shall not be eaten, but eish tisarif. It shall not be eaten, it shall be burnt, it shall be burnt in the fire. So the Gemara says, look, she'ein tamud loman ba'eish tisarif. Well, why does it tell me, if it already tells me don't eat it, why does it tell me burn it in the fire? What's the extra part there? What's the extra part there? I already know I can't eat it. So what's it telling me to burn it in the fire? And what can I even learn from the fact it says ba'eish tisarif? So in legufa, if it's not to teach me about the actual chatas that has become itself, it's not to teach me about the sin offering itself. Because we already know that the chatas offering, when something goes wrong with it, it needs to be burnt up. We already know that. So then why does it tell me burn it in the fire? So leave it. Don't tell me it's talking about chatas. Tell me it's talking about other prohibitions in the Torah. And if it's not talking about eating, because I already know lo ye'achal, I can't eat it, then we should leave it as an available option to teach that there's a prohibition to get benefit. So what have we done? We said there's a seemingly superfluous verse in the context of the chatas offering. In the context of the chatas offering, it says, don't eat it, burn it in fire. Why do I need to know burn it in fire? I already know the chatas offering needs to be burnt in fire in this situation. So it must be that burning in fire is to come to teach me a new prohibition. If it's not teaching me a new prohibition with respect to chatas, it must be teaching me a new prohibition with respect to other prohibitions in the Torah. And if it's not teaching me a prohibition with respect to eating, because the Torah already tells me don't eat the chatas offering, it must be a superfluous teaching, not about chatas, about other prohibitions in the Torah, to teach me that they have a prohibition for getting benefit. And now I know why, unless there's a specific time that the Torah tells me you can get benefit, generally when the Torah says for any prohibition that you may not eat, it doesn't just mean don't eat, it also means don't get benefit. Now the Gemara asks, well, hold on a second. If that's the case, that you're learning out from the context of chatas, so over here, when we're not allowed to get benefit, it's not only we're not allowed to get benefit, we have to destroy it, we have to burn it. So does that mean everything else, when it's got a prohibition on it, we also have to burn it? So therefore, the Gemara says, in the holy, it should be burnt in fire. Meaning, when it's a holy thing, the way of getting rid of it, the way of managing its difficulty is to burn it. Everything else doesn't have to be burnt. Everything else just has the prohibition of getting benefit. The Gemara says, why? Is that true? That when the verse says it should be burnt in holiness, it's coming to teach us that only these holy things shall be burnt, but everything else is just left with the prohibition to get benefit? Is that what it's coming to teach me? We already need that verse. Like Rabbi Shimon, the Tanya, Rabbi Shimon says, this verse, that in holiness it should be burnt in fire, to teach us about the chatas offering that is burnt in the holy, is burnt b'kodesh. What does that mean? It's burnt b'kodesh, meaning it's burnt in the temple precinct. It has to be burnt there, and it can't be taken out of the temple. So I already have a necessity for that verse, and therefore it can't teach me that all the prohibitions on the Torah, when they become invalidated, that they don't also need to be burnt. So ve'eni elazu bilvad. And I only know this. Sulei kachi kachim ve'emuri kachim kalaminayin. What about the negated holy sacrifices and the innards of the less intensely holy sacrifices? How do I know that those things also need to be burnt? Talmud Lomar in the temple precinct. Talmud Lomar v'chol b'kodesh ba'ishes tisarif, and everything which is in the holy needs to be burnt in fire. So we've got a rejection of this approach, and we attempted to find a new source, and then we got stuck at the last hurdle to try and demonstrate that prohibitions that are don't have to be burnt when they come about. It's just a prohibition to get benefit, but not that I have to discard it through burning. And I haven't been able to demonstrate that these things don't need to be burnt. So I've fallen short of the final hurdle. So what does this rabbi? Remember, we started by saying this rabbi was sitting there in front of Shmuel bar Nachmani, and he says, well, Amar Lei, he says to Amar Lei, Rabbi Yonasan Rabcha. He says to Shmuel bar Nachmani, he says, Rabbi, who is your rabbi? Which verse did he use? Maybe he used he actually didn't he say it from this verse? Your rabbi, didn't he say it from this verse? And what we're going to say now is that he's going to show what this Shmuel bar Nachmani's rabbi brought it from, and then he's going to say, well, actually, it doesn't work. That one doesn't work out either. So didn't your rabbi bring it from this verse? If there's left over from the flesh of the miluim sacrifice and from the bread until the morning. So that verse, by the way, that verse continues and it says, Lo ye'achel, don't eat this leftovers, ki kodeshu, because it is holy. Don't eat it. So the Gemara says, Well, what do I need to learn? It shall not be eaten. Why do I need to know that I can't eat the leftover sacrifice? I already know I can't eat leftover sacrifices. If it's not talking about the actual verse, the actual context, which is talking about the leftover miluim offering, how do I know that I don't need to teach it that? Because the verse already says, I shall burn up the leftovers in fire. So then it should be talking about the other prohibitions in the Torah. The other prohibitions in the Torah have this prohibition applied to them. Well, what prohibition is it? If it's not teaching me to prohibit eating, because I already know these other prohibitions are prohibited from eating, because over there, in each of those contexts, like we talked about orla, we talked about sheretz, all these things, it already says don't eat. So if it's not talking about not eating, and it is nevertheless talking about these other prohibitions in the Torah, so what must it be referring to? It must be referring to it must be talking about the prohibition to get benefit. So the Gemara says, well, well, hold on a second. If we're learning it out from the leftover miluim offering, so the thing that we need to do with the leftovers is it needs to be burnt. Does that mean that all the other prohibitions in the Torah, when we can't eat it and we can't get benefit, we have to burn it? So it says you should burn the leftovers. No sabra sreifa, the leftovers are burned. The ein kodesun shebatorah b'sreifa, and not all the other prohibitions in the Torah, when they become prohibited, do they have to be burnt? Is that true? That when the Torah said, "Don't eat the leftovers of the miluim offering," it was coming to teach me. It was coming to teach me for all the other prohibitions in the Torah not to get benefit. We already need that. It's not a superfluous verse. Lichter Rabbi Elazar, like that which Rabbi Elazar said. The Amar Rabbi Elazar said, "Lo ye'achal, don't eat it ki kodeshu, because it's holy." Kol shebekodesh pasol, b'hakasav listen lo sa'asa ad chilasto. Anything which is holy that has become invalidated, the verse is coming to give us a new lav, a new negative mitzvah, negative commandment not to eat it. So it's coming to enforce a new sort of stringency of prohibition on these things. That's what it's coming to say. It's not referring to all the other prohibitions in the Torah. It's coming quite directly to speak about anything that was holy that they became invalidated. And therefore, I don't have it superfluous to teach a prohibition to get benefit from elsewhere. So this rabbi who was sitting in front of Shmuel bar Nachmani, he says, look, you slogged me up. You said I don't have a superfluous verse to teach what I need. Well, look, your rabbi doesn't have a superfluous verse to teach what he needs either. So we have a deadlock here. We don't have a way forward. So Amar Abaye says, La'olam mikra kama. No, really it's talking, we're learning it out from the first verse. What was the first verse? The first verse was talking about the chatas offering. The chatas offering which said, don't eat it, burn it in fire. But Abaye notices an extra dimension to the verse which can be used to support the drasha to give us one more thing for the puzzle. What does he notice? He says, "Ve'epuch," switch it around, because the Torah could have just written, burn it in fire, and it wouldn't have needed to write, don't eat it, right? If you burn it in fire, for sure you can't eat it. So the very fact that the Torah wrote, don't eat it, it must be, or it shall not be eaten, it must be that is giving us an additional thing to learn, an additional dimension for the drasha. So why does the Torah teach me I can't eat this chatas offering? I don't need to know that once I know that I have to burn it. So in legufai, if I don't need it for the actual verse itself, why do I not need it for the context of chatas? Because now I can combine, I can make a mashup of the two different approaches. Because I already learned from the Rebbe Elazar on the previous point. Rebbe Elazar said that when there's the leftovers of the miluim offering, the lo ye'achel over there comes to give me a negative commandment on all holy things that they should not be eaten once they're invalidated. So since I don't need to teach an additional negative don't eat, why don't I need to teach an additional negative don't eat? I already have that over there as revealed to me by the leftovers of the miluim offering. So all that's left to me is something additional, something superfluous. So what do I see? So therefore, I can now allow this "don't eat" to refer to all the prohibitions in the Torah. And if it's not going to come to teach me about the prohibition to eat, at least it will teach me about the prohibition to get benefit. We said that if over here the chatas needs to be burnt, all the other prohibitions in the Torah need to be burnt. So amakra hanosar, only the leftovers. Hanosar b'sreifa, it's only the leftovers that get burnt. They ain't called a sin shabbatorah b'sreifa, and not everything else needs to be burnt. And now that what I've done is I've made a mashup of the two different contexts. I've made a mashup of the chatas offering together with the leftovers of the miluim offering, and by combining the drushes of both, I now have enough things to teach everything I wanted to teach. I can teach Rabbi Lazar, I can teach Rabbi Shimon, and I can still teach what I'm trying to teach right now, which is that there is enough leftovers in the pasuk to teach me that a prohibition is not referring to the context, it's referring to all the other prohibitions in the Torah. What's it coming to prohibit? Everything else is already prohibited to be eaten. It must be coming to prohibit something else. What's it coming to prohibit? Benefit. Why is it that even that I don't have to burn it? Because there's another verse still that's left over to teach me that I don't only have to burn the holy things, I don't have to burn the non-holy things. Okay, so that's Abaye. Amalei Rav Papa. Rav Papa responds to Abaye. He says, maybe the reason that the Torah said don't eat in the context of chatos is to have a special prohibition only there, a separate prohibition by the chatas. Because if it's from the Rabbi Lazar said there was this general prohibition learnt out by the nosar, the leftovers of the miluyim offering. There was a general prohibition on all holy things that become invalidated, a general prohibition on them. But if we have a principle that we can't give lashes on a negative commandment that is an overarching category that expands to lots of different contexts. The only way we can give lashes if there's a specific prohibition. Therefore, maybe the reason we have a lo ye'achel, a don't eat when it comes to chatas, when it comes to the sin offering, is not to teach me about everything else, is to teach me about something about chatas. What's it to teach me about chatas? That I'll get lashes if I consume or use inappropriately this chatas. So we don't have anything extra now. And we don't have anything extra for everything else. We're still stuck. So Ella Amar Papa says Mihacha. No, it's from over here. The verse says Vahabasar. That the flesh that touches anything which is impure, it shall not be eaten. Instead, it shall be burnt. Why is the Torah coming to teach me don't eat it? Why is the Torah come to teach me don't eat the flesh that has touched the impure meat? If it's not for the verse itself, because we can already learn out the prohibition to eat meat that has become impure from an kavachomer, from an a fortiori argument. What's the kavachomer? The kavachomer is so therefore, sorry, the kavachomer the maisa hakal from maisa, which is a more lenient area. Why? Uma maisa hakal amra Torah. Just as Meiser, which is lenient, the tithe, which is lenient, the Torah says, Lo bi'arti menu b'tamei, that there's a negative commandment applied to Meiser to tithes when it's in a state of impurity. So Basar Kodesh, holy meat, Chamor, which is more stringent, Loi Kol Shekain, is it not all the more so that there will be a negative commandment applied to not consuming holy meat that becomes impure, right? If you can't have impure meiser, impure tithes, for sure you can't have impure holy meat, and therefore I don't need to be told don't eat it. If I don't need to be told don't eat it, what's it coming to teach me? It's coming to teach me instead something about other prohibitions. Before we say that, if you're going to tell me that I can't create a negative rule from a logical argument from a kal v'chomer, so you're going to tell me I can't make any inferences from tithing to the holy meat that becomes impure, because that's only based on a logic. It's not based on any sort of verse basis. The Gemara says, no, it's a connection that the verses themselves make, because the pasuk says, "Lo sucha le'echa b'sharecha," you may not eat in your gates. Meiser de goncha, the tithing of your produce, tiroshecha v'torecha, of chores b'karcha, and the firstborn of your bakar, of your cattle. And so the Torah has, and the Torah and the verse continues. The verse over there continues, and all the oaths that one will make, all the donations, and all the other types of donations. Now, these donations are offerings. And so the Torah has already connected the prohibition of having inappropriate maisa with the prohibition of having inappropriate offerings. So we already know that they're connected by the Torah. And once I know that maisa, tithes when they're impure, may not be eaten, I would also, from this connection the verse makes, also know that sacrifices, holy meat, when it becomes impure, it may also not be eaten. So therefore, why does the verse come again and teach me by a sacrificial meat that becomes impure, that I may not eat it? If it's not talking about this context itself where it's written, it must refer to all other prohibitions in the Torah. And if it's not talking about the other prohibitions in the Torah being prohibited to be eaten, because it already says by orla, it already says by sheretz don't eat. So at least it will come to teach me that I may not get benefit. The Gemara asks, once again, do I now have to burn this? Just as I have to burn the holy meat that becomes impure, I have to burn everything else. Amakra, then the verse says, a mashup from Noisar HaMiluim, the leftovers of the Miluim offering, HaNoisar B'Sreifa in Kodesh Shabbator B'Sreifa. That which is left over, those ones, the holy things, those things have to be burnt, but not everything else needs to be burnt when there's a prohibition attached to it. Amale Ravina Ravashi. So Ravina says to Ravashi, Ve'ema la'avor ala b'shnei lavin. Maybe the reason that it says don't eat is not to teach me about everything else, it's to teach me about this. Why would I need it to teach me about this? Surely I already know I'll get lashes. Surely I already know it's a specific, I've already got a specific prohibition from the connection in the verse, the hekesh in the verse, teaching me I'll get lashes anyway. Why would I need to get another negative commandment? So he says, maybe it's to transgress two negative commandments. We can make a double prohibition, a double whammy, because Miyam Rabbi, didn't Abai teach me, Achol Putzya, if I eat a sheret of the sea, Loke Arba, I will have transgressed four things. Nimale, if I eat a sheret of the earth, Loke Chamesh, I will be lashed on five things. Tzira, if I eat a sheret that is of the air, Loke Sheish, I will be lashed 6 times. Don't we see that sometimes you can build up prohibitions one on top of the other? So too here, maybe the reason it says don't eat this holy sacrificial meat that became impure is in order to teach me that I've now done 2 things wrong. So the Gemara says, any time that I have the ability to make a drasha, we'll make the drasha, and I won't start piling on different prohibitions. And therefore it's preferential to say it's not talking about this context, it's talking about all the other prohibitions. To teach the other prohibitions I'm not allowed to get benefit from. Okay, now that we've done that, we've sort of solved the issue. We've found a third route, not a Rebbe Avahu route, not a Chizkiah route, but a new route to prohibit everything, all other things in the Torah. When it says don't eat, it also means don't get benefit. Now we've got found another route to get there. Let's just sort of dot the I's and cross the T's. So it says Vahabasar sheyiga b'chol tameh. We're on the third line of 24b. It says Vahabasar sheyiga b'chol tameh lo yochel. The flesh which touches anything which is impure, it shall not be eaten. Dereisha lamali. That quote from the beginning of the verse, why do I need to be told don't eat? That at the beginning of the verse. It seems like I've covered all the possibilities. I don't need it anymore to teach about other things. I don't need it to teach. Right? So what's the purpose of another negative commandment? So the Gemara says, "L'rabos eitzim v'levona v'habasar." So l'rabos eitzim v'levona. to include the wood and the frankincense, the incense, that these things also have a prohibition attached to them when they become impure. That's what it's talking about. That's why I need another negative commandment. And also the prohibition of not eating in the end of the verse. What's that coming to teach me? The rabbis emurim, to include the innards of the sacrifice. The innards of the sacrifice, if they become impure, they are also prohibited. The Gemara says, I don't need to teach about the innards of the sacrifice. Emurim mehasam nafka. The emurim, the innards of the sacrifice, when they become impure, they're learned from elsewhere that there's a problem. The Tanya, as it says in the Brisa, the person that will eat from the flesh of the zevach hashlamim, asher Hashem, that is to God, the rabbi says emurim, that comes to include the emurim, the innards, as part of the holy sacrifice. And therefore, if it's included as part of the holy sacrifice, it would also be included in the original source for when it becomes impure. So the Gemara says, Hasam tumas aguf b'koreis, hacha tumas basa b'lav. There, it's talking about when the person eats it in a state of impurity. That's where there's a problem of spiritual excision of koreis. Here, we're talking about where the emurim, the sacrificial items themselves, the innards themselves, become impure. There, it's a negative commandment, and that's why you need two different contexts, two different verses. Okay, and so we've crossed the I's and dotted the T's. Now that we've done that, and we've been throughout this time, we've been speaking about a prohibition of eating and a prohibition of getting benefit. How does one transgress the prohibition of eating? As an example, okay, so like park for a second, pause. We're moving on. We've had our third route. We've crossed the I's. We've got the T's. We have Rabbi Yevo. We've got Chizkiah. We've got our third route, and now we're moving on. Okay, if I have a prohibition to eat something, how do I transgress it? Like, for example, if I snort it, if I snort some powder that is prohibited, it's some rhino horn or something like that. I don't know. So is that going to be a prohibition? If I insert it as a suppository, I insert some juicy pork as a suppository in a capsule, is that going to be a prohibition of eating? Is there going to be a prohibition of getting benefit? Well, why not? You know, so let the Gemara is now going to bring down an axiom which is actually so relevant for halacha. The Gemara says as follows: Amar Rabbi Yevo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol isurin shebaTorah, anything which is prohibited in the Torah to eat, ein lokin alehen, we don't get malchus. Notice it says we don't get lashes. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not prohibited, but it means we won't get lashes on it, ela derech achilason, unless it's done in the ordinary way of eating. So when might this be relevant? You know, you could think about caffeine suppositories on Yom Kippur, for want of a better example. So,
pills.
Pardon?
Pills. The casing
pills,
around
exactly. Pills that you don't eat them, you just swallow them down. You just in one go. So one wouldn't get lash. And so sometimes, you know, some people have these you can get pills like headache pills, which are gelatin based, but you just swallow it down. So some people are okay with having those. So what does this come to exclude? That's to come to exclude a case of eating raw fat, raw forbidden fat. No one eats raw fat. That's not how you eat, right? That's gross. So eating a raw piece of fat would not be something that one would get lashes for, even though the fat itself is prohibited to eat. Ikad Amri, there are those who teach this law in the following way. Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. He says, Kol Yisurin Shebatorah, all the prohibitions of the Torah, Ein Lokin Aleihen, we won't get lashes on them, Ela Derech Hanasan, unless we do it in the normal way of getting benefit. So here we're not talking about the prohibition of eating, we're talking about the prohibition of getting benefit. How do I transgress the prohibition of getting benefit? It's only when I'm using it in its normal form. What does that come to exclude? That's to exclude a case that I take the forbidden fats of a gored ox, or a stoned ox. Now, what's the problem with the stoned ox? Remember, there's only two things so far that we've actually seen that have a Torah prohibition of benefit: chametz on Pesach and the carcass of the stoned ox. So I take the fat of the stoned ox, which has a Torah prohibition of benefit, and I've got a wound. And so I take that fat and I rub it onto the wound. Now, that's actually not the way to get benefit from these fats. That's not normal. The normal way to get benefit from these fats would be to use it as a method in tanning, to take a hide and to smooth softening oils on it, right? Like a saddle soap, so to speak, or on your shoes. But it's not to smooth it over your wound. So therefore, it's not the ordinary way, the normal way of getting benefit, and therefore that will not be prohibited. That will be exempt. That will be exempt from lashes. The kol shekain, all the more so, all the more so if taking benefit in an abnormal way is exempt, eating something in an abnormal way is also exempt. Itman Nami, there was another Amoraic statement to the same effect. Amr of Acha bar Avia, Amr of Asi, Amr of Yochanan. He says, if we leave fats, the forbidden fats of the stoned ox on top of my wound, Potter, I'm exempt. Why? Because all the prohibitions in the Torah, we only get lashed for them when we do it in the manner of getting benefit. Amar Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Zera wants to try and say that this principle that Rabbi Yochanan, the Amora, has taught, that's also a principle brought from the Tanaim of the Mishnah of the Brises. Why? Because it says, "Ein sofikin es ha'arbayim mishum orla, ela al hayotzim min hazeisim u'min ha'anovim." He says, we will only give lashes because of transgressing orla. Remind ourselves, Jeremy reminded us yesterday that orla is fruit from the first planted within, I think either Jeremy or it was Jeff, one of our J's. So the orla is when it's planted in the first 3 years of planting. We're not allowed to eat the fruit. So it says we won't get lashes because of these young fruits, unless we're talking about only on those things which come out of olives and grapes. Meaning, if you've got a bunch of olives and grapes which are lying around and there's some juice that flows out of them, so then drinking that juice will be a violation of orla. But if we're talking about strawberries, figs, and pomegranates that are sitting around, they're also within 3 years, and the juices of those fruits ooze out. We drink that juice. We won't have transgressed the prohibition. My ta'ama, what's the reason? Isn't that because we haven't eaten it in the way of its pleasure, of its benefit? Normally, you don't take any benefit from the run-off juice of strawberries that have been sitting around. Whereas when you do that, when it comes to olives and grapes, the juice is very valuable, and so therefore the normal way of getting benefit is to take the run-off juice. Whereas strawberries, you wouldn't, and therefore maybe it's coming to teach us, this Tana is coming to teach us, that anytime it's not normal, we won't get lashes, we'll be exempt. So Amale Abaye says back, it's not such a great proof from this Tanaic source. It would be good if this was talking about not eating the fruit itself in such a way that it's abnormal. That would be a good way to teach this law. But here, that's not what the law is focused on. It's not whether we're eating it in the way of its benefit. It's talking about the juices that ooze out. And here, it's teaching us a different law, that the juices that ooze out of not anything which is not a grape or an olive is just called sweat. And therefore, it's not significant. Whereas juices that ooze out of grapes and olives, that is called mashke, that's actually called juice, and therefore it will have the prohibition of orla applied to it. We saw this already when we learned the sugya of schita, of squeezing on Shabbat in Maseches Shabbos, that we saw over there that mid-da'iraisa, there's only going to be a problem of squeezing, according to one opinion, there's only going to be a problem of squeezing grapes and olives, because only they produce what is considered to be a mashke, a juice. Everything else just produces fruit sweat. So next time you're having a strawberry juice, really you're drinking fruit sweat. Maybe nowadays that we do juice strawberries, it's a little bit different. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Great. So I think Andrew, I'm going to stop here because.
Where are you on the Hebrew side?
About 10 lines up. Last word on the line is Amar. First word line is Abaye, and that begins a whole new section.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for logging on and changing the time. I hope anyone who's
Rabbi,
recording.
when you planted fruit trees, the all-out period is 3 years from planting or 3 years from the first fruit?
That's a great question. Sully.
Because you might go 5 years without any fruit coming up.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know that. That's a great question. If anyone wants to log off, people are going to be logging in now for the Hanukkah lighting. So
Do you want to just tell me the reference, the web